So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the fifth or fourth session in the Digital Food 2021 series focused on business cases. So today we have continuing our previous discussions on compliance, on risk management, on the role of data in that, and especially we will discuss with a big player in the chain, supermarket. So to introduce again, my name is Tiffany Tsui. I'm your moderator of today's session. I'm a global strategist, consultant, and entrepreneur. Other than hosting the digital food platform, I am the CSO of Vertical Farm Institute with the ambition with a goal to develop sustainable ultra short chain for cities. And the driving force is also about sustainability, trust, and healthy food. So normally I'm based in the Netherlands, normally with the virtual background, but you see that today I'm actually calling live from Berlin. I'm discussing with one of the biggest urban developer in Berlin with ambition to develop Europe's biggest multi-functional urban complex, zero carbon development, with its own vertical farm to supply its tenants and visitors with ultra fresh and ultra sustainable food. So it's a new development. Also relating to our topic today is consumers today increasingly are asking for green, sustainable, good for planet, good for soil, good for CO2, but they are also very complex decisions. So in today's session, I will very happy to have Leon Mol, who's the Director for Compliance and Product Safety at Ahold Delhaize, really a leading, let's say, player in the supply chain, to discuss what does it mean about when Ahold Delhaize started issuing, let's say, demand on sustainability, transparency, and what does it mean for the players down the chain or to the cooperation partners. So to start, before we go into discussion, let's start with a poll question. Today we'll have Anushka, who will be helping us with the poll questions. We have 3 questions to get you thinking about your choices today you have to face. First question is, what is better for the environment? Cage-grown chicken, in Dutch it's called the plofkip, that they stay in cages, they grow very fast. Or the free-range chicken. In the supermarket here, you get all different kind of labels. Second question is, what is more sustainable in a broader sense? Imported, organic tomatoes, for example, if you live in Holland, or locally grown produce, but might need additional help, like lighting or heating. And the third one, what is a healthier and better choice? A bag of Lay's chips or piece of cheese? So make your choice, and then we can immediately see the result. So in the meantime, I would like to ask Leon, what is your answer to these 3 questions from your point of view?
Yeah, good day, everybody. It's not an easy to give answer, Tiffany, because
you have to choose one. That's the question.
Well, you simply do not provide us with the information to take a decision on that. And of course, I'm saying that because that's the topic of this afternoon. But
yes.
If I'm a consumer and I have this choice, actually I don't know anything. It's all on perception, and that's what I would at least like to avoid the customers to be forced into that situation as far as possible.
But oftentimes we are faced, and we have to make that choice. Also by marketing, by conscience, that we have to make a moral choice almost. So Anushka, can we see the results, or what are the responses from our audience today? What do you make? You have to make one choice, huh? Okay, so what is better for the environment? 80% says cage-ground chicken. Actually, yes, that is actually, we can with calculation numbers that the intensively grown chicken do emit less CO2 and less impact to the environment. And this topic of what is more sustainable, locally grown or imported but organic, it's always divided. We ran this poll also earlier. The healthier choice, interesting. That's the interesting one. Because indeed, it didn't give you, by choice, didn't give you enough question, because of course, even in the Delhaize chips, you have different choices. You have the regular ones, you have the more healthier, baked with olive oil, with additional herbs kind of choice. If you look at the, let's say, Nutri-Score, a bag of Lay's chips that's baked has a score of B. Whereas a piece of cheese, of course, there are also a range of choices, is typically with Nutri-Score E. So in that sense, Nutri-Score is telling us choose bag of chips instead of a piece of cheese. So in this case, I think consumers still think cheese at least has some nutritional value, which contrary to what Nutri-Score might tell you. So indeed, choice enough for consumers, but we actually do not know what we're choosing anymore. Leon, let's tell us from a supermarket point of view, what are you doing about this?
Well, Tiffany, I think that's quite a complicated story, isn't it? I mean, you try to at least have your baseline right. I mean, you try to have your brand image or your supermarket image at a level that the customers at least trust that you offer them a baseline of good products. On top of that, you offer variation, that you show to the customers that there are better products, and better in the sense of health, better in the sense of environment, if you can, or also on ethical things like animal welfare. So it is a quite complex puzzle, but what you would like to do is at least to show that transparency.
Mm-hmm. So on that note, you can maybe start with your part one, the introduction to this topic. Go ahead.
Yes, we can. So, well, this is no more than the title page, so you may go to the next page. And that's showing that, of course, as Ahold Delhaize, we have quite a variety of local supermarket chains, 19 chains in 8 different countries. We have quite a big footprint in the US, but we are in 6 European countries also, Eastern Europe, Northwestern Europe, Netherlands, Belgium, and Greece, and we have a small entity in Indonesia. And that makes that we have quite a variation in customer preference. We have quite a variation in sourcing areas, but whatever we do, we want to surprise, to inspire our customers. The next slide, please. And then as every company, I think we also have our overarching themes, and actually we say we want to make it easy for our customers to make healthy and sustainable choices. And if you refer back to that first poll that we had, already you see that it is not that easy to make those choices. So where does information or technical information stop, facts stop, and where does interpretation start? And I think that's one of the topics that I would at least like to exchange on this afternoon, because that's very crucial for us. Yes, please. Here you see how we are located globally, and you can imagine that if a customer shops with us at the east coast of the US, because that's where we are located, they look differently to a product than a customer in the Netherlands or in Greece or in Indonesia. And at all places, we still want to offer them the right choice with the right information. Yes, please. And that's part of a bigger picture, I have to say, because our customers, of course, they buy the products in our stores only when they trust it. And then information is coming to the customers from different angles, positive and negative, but really they sometimes wonder, is really in the pack what we write on the pack? Is the label right? Where does it come from? Is that indicated on the pack? Yes, of course, there is a brand on the pack, but where do the ingredients come from? And then, of course, is it right? Is it true what's written there? Yes, please. But at the end, we cannot start doubting or continue doubting about everything always, because then there would be question marks remaining that we have to decide not to market the product. So at the end, we want to sell products to the customer where we have a reasonable level of credibility, of assurance, that we at least have the feeling that we did everything that we can do to guarantee that it is trustful. Yes, please. And then we need to take into account, or at least be careful that it is about a whole package. Of course, food is about quality and taste. It's about safety. And actually, those are still the top line criteria that we need to look at. Because if you don't have a tasteful, right quality food, which is safe, you simply do not want to sell it and you cannot sell it. And then all the other criteria are on top of that. Ethical conditions, child labor, bonded labor. What are the health details? Production method. I mean, we have customers that prefer organic, but you also can take care for the environment in other ways. What's pesticide use, both from an environmental point of view and from a health point of view. So that's all in that set of information that the customer requires from us, but not always the full set. Different customers look for different information. Yes, please. For example, if we look at our subsidiary in Indonesia, you can imagine that the food safety perception based on their culture, their way of preparing food is fundamentally different than when we go to the next slide. Then when we are in the US, in this case, it is in Portland, Ohio, at Hannaford, where they have a completely different expectation of how they should eat, what they should eat, and what they should buy. Yes, please. And for us, the start is always a materiality analysis. And this one is just copied from our annual report 2021. And well, as most of you would know, we have some inherent risk, business continuity, information security, labor, our own associates. I mean, those are kind of straightforward. Then there is a number of topics where there is a principal risk involved, but it is also a risk outside our own operations. So that's the intersecting topics, and that's, well, CO2 emissions you see there. It's customer health and safety, food waste. Well, those topics are very important to us, and they are important for the outside world. At the right side of the slide, you see also material, environmental, of sustainability impacts, but those are not directly influencing our result. They are influencing our image, but not directly our business results, like fair labor practices, transparency, sustainability in the agriculture, sustainable packaging. I think sustainable packaging, by the way, is on the edge of being very principled. If you look at plastics, but packaging is more, of course. We also have paper packaging, we have glass bottles, we have aluminum tins. So there is a whole set of criteria there. And at the end, we need to well, find a priority in there. We need to find out where to act, because please keep in mind that as a food retailer, at least in our case, we are not a producer, we are not a processor, we are not a manufacturer. We just buy products and sell them to the customer. We are a forwarding station. Yes, please. And I'll give you some examples. And here you see how we take direction on human rights. And we align with the UN Global Compact principles. We are supporting the forced labor resolution of the Consumer Goods Forum. That you say, well, we need to be net zero deforestation, zero deforestation net. We ask our suppliers, and suppliers, that's the place where the final product is made, to have a social audit if it's in riskful countries. We do a human rights due diligence, and we also publish a report. But still then, on the right side, we have salient issues. We have issues. We know, and I think I can say that, well, quite with the being convinced that it's true, that all the issues that you can think of, you may find in 1 hour supply chains of one of the hundreds of thousands own brand products that we market globally. You will find issues. We know it, we cannot avoid it, but our challenge is knowing where they are and knowing how material they are and what we can do. And then I'm thinking of the inner circle there: forced labor, freedom of association, women's rights. Well, those are quite close to us, but if you look at the outer circle, then it's already one step further away. And it's less actionable, but I'll come back on that later. Yes, please. And then on top of the social issues, of course, more and more, we are looking at what's happening and how much pressure does the production, especially of agriculture production, how much pressure does it put on the environment? And then this map shows, and that's an FAO report copy, how do we look at water stress, or where can we find the areas with a lot of water stress in the world? And then you see Northwestern Europe doesn't have too much water stress. Well, we all know that we also in the Netherlands have warm and dry summers sometimes, that we all complain and that there is no water. But by far, that's not comparable to what we find in Africa, what we find in the US to a big part, and in other parts of the world. Yes, please. Same for soil carbon. Well, you see a lot of similarities with water. I mean, if you have water, you have plant growth, and you have organic carbon. That's quite a good relation. So also here you see, yes, I will find organic material in the soil, and that's very important when you think about climate and climate mitigation, but also plant productivity for agriculture. You see big differences in the global map. Yes, please. Pesticides, similar map, but there you see the high pressure areas, which are the darkest, in the areas with very intensive agricultural productions. Well, of course, you don't see them in the Sahara, in Africa too much. There is no vegetation there. Polar areas also not. So what I want to show you here is that at first there is diversity, and secondly, it is not everywhere a clear cut. If we want inside our company to come to a strategy, we need to look at differences between US and Europe, for example. But also we need to look at differences in sourcing areas, Southern Hemisphere, but also when we go to Asia, for example. Yes, please. And then to make it complicated enough, if we zoom in, and this is also based on soil health, which is very much related to soil organic material. If you then zoom in on Europe, the bigger map, and even more on the Netherlands, then you see the same variation that you may see globally, you will see back on a very small country scale as in the Netherlands. And then it becomes very complicated for us, because there it becomes complicated to make the right choices and to create the right transparency for ourselves at first, to know where we have our products from, but also for the customer. I mean, how can they have all that knowledge to see if a product that they buy is what they perceive as good enough? Yes, please. Next one. So what do we want to do? What do we do? We need to filter out the most material risks or topics for improvement. And then we need to ask ourselves, can we make a topic really big of importance? Are we in the right position to make a topic big? Is it actionable? Can we get our supply chains to move? Because, as I said, we do not produce anything ourselves. And very important, also, can we show or report that we have the right impact in the supply chains or on the product performance? And even more important than showing what we do is that we are able to explain why we are not doing things. I mean, stakeholders are, of course, asking us how we perform on the things that we do, but it's even more important to give them the right answer, that why we do not act on some topics that some stakeholders consider material, and they are probably, but for us, there may be topics that are more actionable, more material than those.
On that note, Leon, let's take a break.
Yeah, sure.
There's a lot of questions already on the question of balancing different risks. For all, one thing is the bottom line and price. And you just named a number of big topics in the world on soil, on biodiversity, on water stress, and these topics are becoming more and more on the minds of consumers. But what is important? Which topic do you work on? So on that note, Anushka, let's ask the second part of the poll question. What do you think is important? So in this number of areas, we ask what if you only can choose one most important domain in sustainability, in goodness, again in the broader sense, perception. What is most important to you? Animal well-being, environment, nutrition, the traceability overall, equity contribution, or social responsibility of the overall business. So the operation by themselves. In here, we didn't mention price. Of course, that's of course a top issue. But if you can make one choice out of this goodness domain, please do so. So you mentioned a number of topics, a lot of it's on the environment. Leon, what is your choice if you have to choose just one domain you really have to focus on? What is most important that is actionable, can the biggest concern, and then has the biggest return, let's say, for impact?
Well, there is an order in these topics to a certain extent, to my opinion, and that's also what appears from shopping behavior of customers, and that is that if it comes very close to their personal life, it is most material and the most important first criteria to make a choice on. So that's, in this case, nutrition and human health. I mean, customers first are quite selfish. I have to say that they first think about themselves. Is it good to eat? Is it nice to eat? Is it healthy to eat? And then that's topped up, that's added by the other topics. And then, of course, it depends on the product. Animal-related products, meat, for example, animal well-being is important, considered by the customers. And I think that it is an ethical thing to look after. So I also personally I consider animal well-being as a very important one and a choice that you can make.
Okay. Do you think that's where consumer choice can make a difference? The biggest difference, I say.
Well, the consumer can make a difference in all the topics.
Yeah.
But there are topics also for the customer that are much more a clear choice than others. It's very difficult to choose on environment if you don't know the interpretation of the information that you have.
Did everybody answer the questions, Anushka? Can we see the result? So actually, we had this question also in an earlier discussion on the goodness domain, indeed. And this 6 criteria is based on a French label on sustainability. So that's kind of the barn, and they are presented as a one whole, so all together, but in the end, you actually do not know anymore. So that this is actually exact same result as last time, even more. When we asked the last session that majority of people choose environment to be the biggest, most important domain for them. That precisely, actually, because there's very limited information on what that really means, but it is a top concern. So other things actually a little less. It's interesting to actually, isn't it? That people, indeed, consumer are selfish. They concern more to their own health. What is the impact, also price. But on the, let's say, the social front, conscience, the environment is very high on the agenda. But it's very difficult. Carbon footprint, biodiversity, these are really complex topics. So what can you do as a supermarket to be better at informing consumers?
Yeah, I think definitely that's if I can answer that one, that's for us, for me, it's also the difference between what's high on the agenda of a customer, or in general of the population of the communities, and what do they act on when they buy the products. And that does not need to be the same, but we see still a clear difference there. And so yes, I recognize this pattern. And so and I think that's very good, because that shows that there is a real drive, a real push to emphasize environment in also for the future in what we do and how the development should be. At the same time, the shopping behavior of a customer can be a little bit more conservative.
Yes, that's correct, because number of questions we can come back later during discussion indeed covers that topic, especially relevant to ask you from a supermarket point of view. The bottom line issue, the price, affordability, especially today's environment, is even more important. Before we can go on to look at your thinking, what are you moving, what's your roadmap forward, and then in better informing the supply chain. But Anushka, we can already ask the third last question to think about, but we don't show the result until the end of Leon's presentation. So let's show that. It's a question on, yes, that's the question, what is the biggest challenge? That also a question for you to think about when we are discussing is what is so difficult to make informed decisions? Is because too many labels and standards, which you also work with? Is there lack of technical infrastructure, so data availability and reporting? Is it the lack of coordination between players? Or is it just simply put, what is better? The pure definition, what is better and good? So while we are thinking about this question, then we can continue with your second part of the presentation.
Sure. So let's go to the next slide. And by the way, the last slide, but you don't need to go back, that image there was chosen on purpose, because the way we look at that whole package of topics, of issues, of opportunities maybe, is like looking at a very giant tree as a human being. I mean, where to start if you want to climb the tree? And that's exactly the second part of this presentation. So the next one, please. So we as a retailer, as I said, we have so many different products, and then mainly we look still at own brand products. So the products that we are in direct contact with the manufacturers or with the producers, and where we have, well, a certain connection with. But we have so many, hundred thousands of products, that it's impossible to dive into each individual supply chain. So to take a decision, to make a analysis of where to focus on, we start always with using public sources. We say, well, there are public sources, and there are listed a number there: the World Bank Corruption Index, Water Risk Map of WWF, where you have quite independent, open source, credible data, at least credible to a certain extent, where you can verify, where you can analyze, and so on. So that's the base. And then in addition, we use certification data. We have certification reports of some of our suppliers, not all of them, but we have them. And those standards, like there are Amphori on social compliance, BRCGS on food safety, those are sitting on databases, and they make analysis. So they don't tell us about the suppliers that are not supplying to us, but they have overall analysis of what you can expect in certain areas, sourcing areas, and they have an analysis of issues that occur from a much wider set of companies than your own suppliers. And if you combine those with the public sources, then you are having already a very good base where you don't need to do the interpretation. And the interpretation comes later when you look at your own specific activities. And then, of course, we look at specific data of our brands. The brands, in our case, are the country organizations. So we have brands in the Netherlands, we have them in Belgium, we have them in the US, and they have their own data sets of their own suppliers. So they make those broad data more specific. And they do that based on audits, they do it based on metrics more and more, and that's going to be more important. If you think about the carbon footprint, that's a quite straightforward one, but also number of recalls, for example, on food safety, is a very good indicator. And then, of course, we listen to stakeholders. Our investors have their opinion about priorities. NGOs can be, well, perceived as negative, but they are actually a very big source of information also. So it's important to have the right dialogue with NGOs, to make use of the information, to make your own risk analysis better. Next slide, please. This all we have tried to simplify in a very simple tool, which our supermarket chains, our brands are using, and we are combining all the topics that I presented up until now. Yes, please. Next one. In effect, what we do is we say, well, you have your main categories. Within those categories, and I would just name fruit and vegetables. In fruit and vegetables, you have fresh, you have frozen, you have canned. Those can have different sourcing areas. Those have different characteristics and different opportunities. So what we say is list the most important ones. Next slide, please. And then also look, what did you do already? Because we are not starting from scratch. In food, we have a great history on food safety. So we know where our suppliers are. Most of them have already a certificate on safety. We have already quite a history of more than 10 years on social audits. So if your country risk, and this is on the slide, is on land conversion, so deforestation or land conversion of other sensitive landscapes, if it has a high score on the risk, which is the first column, you see a 4 there for a certain country. There we ask from the supplier, a 4 is a high risk, a 5 is even higher. if you have that high risk, what did you do? Because that's important for your priority setting. And then you can have all kind of mitigations, but that mitigation needs to be at the right place. Is it at primary production? Is it at the so-called last stage of production, which is the manufacturing side, where the product reaches its final shape and first package? And then, in fact, after that, that's only when the interpretation comes. What's the remaining risk? And what is the brand leverage and the business relevance? So you can imagine if we have products from a very big supplier far away, that we are only a small customer, where if we buy from a local customer, the total yield or the total volume, we are much more important, but also much more in the position to propose and indicate improvements. So that plays a very big role there. So not only what's the risk, but also what can we do about it? What's our potential positive influence there? Yes, please. And having said all that, we are coming to a situation where data becomes a really integral part of the product. We cannot sell a product anymore where we have no data. We need to have certification data on safety, sustainability, animal welfare. We need to know about labor conditions related to the place of production. So that's also data, but also audited. We need also to have this chain of custody in place, because that tells us how reliable the data are. And those data need to be available and accessible. And that's a challenge, because you want to respect data from your suppliers and from the producers behind them. But from the other side, you need data to act on and to tell to the market what the producer did to do the right job and to prove that it is all credible. So data availability is not an easy one. Also, the data privacy legislation doesn't help us a lot sometimes, because there are so many boxes to tick on the way before you have the data, that it becomes more complicated to have data accessible and transparent. And that's not always helping, but understandable. And then, of course, we need all those data to also monitor for continuous improvement. And it's not so much about the current state of the product. Yes, it is. If there is child labor, we don't want to buy it. But if there is a high carbon footprint, we want to improve it. And we don't want to run away. Running away from a supplier is not the best thing to do. At least that's our way of working. We want to improve with our suppliers. So we do want to show improvement rather than compare one-to-one our suppliers. And that, by the way, does make it much easier for the customer. So they need to be, well, almost part of the process, which is very complicated. In this way, we think, because in this stage, we haven't done too much on mitigation, we just made our prioritization of risk. And we think that it's the most effective way as a retailer to take a position in this landscape. Yes, please. Because at the end, if you have a product, and this is fine beans from Kenya, there are some must-dos. It needs to be safe. It needs to be produced under fair labor conditions. But there are also things you want to show, you want to improve on, you want to tell, like packaging, the production process, how much water is used. It's not a direct influence on our customers, also not on us, but if we can show progress, it is very relevant. Like transport, was it coming by air, by plane, or was it coming by boat? And so that whole set of information at the end needs to be there for an individual product rather than for a product category. Yes, please. And what we see there is that if we talk to suppliers, and in the past I was working in the fruit and veg supply chains, and then you're surprised how much detailed data are collected by the farmers in the field, by the packing stations, by the traders. But at the end, what you see back in the market is very, very, very little. So there is so much data lost on the way because of systems that are not compatible, because of just lack of connections, lack of understanding also, the undervaluing of data by the supply chains. But we need to take into account, and that's a no-brainer, that having a data system is not equal to having the right data quality or having credible data. So you cannot say, well, let's not certify, let's just collect data. No, we need to verify, we need to monitor, we need to certify. And on top of that, we can work with metrics and a lot of other things. So how can we then move forward with it? Of course, we are looking at blockchain technology. I have to say, it is not easy. We try to connect data systems, and we try to start internally, because if you see how many different systems are working just separate from each other, then we better start working on those ones first. Next one, please. And I think this picture, and I took this example because it's from our US colleagues, but it shows very well the total landscape. This, if we want to achieve something on regenerative agriculture in this case, but you can think of any other example, then of course you need to have your, and that's the number one on the left, you have your local allies. You need to partner with, and that can be very specific. It can be with Rodale Institute, as for example, as an organic movement in Pennsylvania. Well, you cannot copy paste it to another place, but it is a great example, a great step forward for the local people, local community, and our own colleagues, but also for the customers. But we also need to work with suppliers and the industry. We need to use certification, but also to mainstream on that. We need to align on that. So if you take Global Gap or SAI platform with a farm sustainability assessment, it's important that you are around the table with the retail, with the producers, and with the manufacturers. Up until now, we have been working a lot only with own brand. But what about all the others? What about the national brands, the A brands? They are in the same boat, they are in the same area, they are buying from the same farmers. So more and more, we need to integrate also that kind of pre-competitive activities with everybody working in the same landscape, in the same region. And then, of course, we need also to participate actively in multi-stakeholder initiatives where not only the supply chain is represented, the producers, the manufacturers, but also the NGOs, also the other stakeholders. Because at the end, you want to align and you want to move forward to bring the base up, not to only the very top with great examples, as you see on the left, but you want to bring the baseline up. Yes, please. Another example, and this is really an example of the of a multi-stakeholder initiative. That's the Global Roundtable of Sustainable Beef. Beef being a very challenging area, but there's a lot of fragmentation on the primary production side, the ranchers in the US and the, well, just the cattle farmers in other parts of the world, and dairy farmers where the cows are also slaughtered at the end. That's typically a sector where you need to team up and where you need to align. And then you can come to a global arrangement on the use of antibiotics, for example. So that's also where we as a company put a lot of energy in, realizing that it is not an overnight result. This is a very slow moving vehicle, but if you move, it has a very, very big impact. Yes, please. Coming to the last slide, and I think this is more or less summarizing what I tried at least to explain this afternoon. For doing due diligence, but also for creating impact in our supply chains and in the market, we need to have vertical transparency and alignment. And what I mean with that is, in the supply chains, we need to understand what's happening upstream to the producers, and we need to make use of their knowledge. So we need to understand the potential for improvement. But also we need the horizontal alignment. And we need sector approach to create uniformity and leverage, like with Side Platform, like with the Global Roundtable of Beef. And there are many other initiatives where we can team up in a constructive way to align on an approach. Not aligning on the commercial things, of course, that's everybody's own responsibility, but align on the message that we bring to upstream to the production in close collaboration because of the vertical alignment. And then we need to realize, and that's not really a topic that's discussed a lot, that distance is not helping us. So it's really inversely proportional to impact. Social cohesion and understanding is much stronger if we have local production. The regional products, local products are very popular now. One of the reasons is there is a social connection, not with the product, but with the area of production. The number of steps in the supply chain doesn't really help. I mean, at the beginning of this conversation, we were talking about ultra short supply chains. Yes, but transparent short supply chains help a lot in bringing up the message from upstream to downstream and to show improvement, but also the connection, the collaboration, the conversations. And then, of course, distance usually creates also lower leverage because we simply take a smaller share of the production, are not a direct partner in the conversations, and so on. So what you see happening is that if you have impact, or if you want to have impact, we usually start nearby. We start in an area where we are located, where we have our own customers. That's where we have a very big impact and where we can move relatively fast. After that, the other areas come. Not saying that we should neglect them. Of course, we have certain topics that we have to arrange, and we are doing that. But that's much more on the major topics like deforestation and so on. But if you think about the more complicated topics, really, then distance is not helping us. This is what I wanted to share with you this afternoon. In the chat, I saw a lot of questions. So, Tiffany, go ahead.
Yes, so indeed, we have also good amount of time to have a discussion with you, with everybody. I'll also invite our audience to join in discussion. When we first started the digital food webinar series about a year and a half ago, in the very first one, we had the Global Gap, Christian Miller. Also, the poll question and discussion was, what will be the impact to the role? Will there be fundamental changes to the role of supply chain players? Will that change the role of certifying bodies? Will that change the role of supermarket? So I think for Ahold Delhaize, with being a global, let's say multinational, a role which you, during your presentation, what you also mentioned is that you are in fact also transforming your role to be closer, to be the community. In fact, you are being, let's say, spearheading, you're organizing communities, and you're organizing consortia to become the trusted, let's say, your community partner for consumers, instead of the one just for price. It's kind of also maybe an image issue. The supermarket is not there just to get the cheapest food, which is also important, but you want to be, if consumers can go to Albert Heijn or Ahold Delhaize, that your choice, if you say, tell us, this is our selection, we already did our due diligence, this is our recommended product, the consumer can trust us because we know what's happening, that will certainly be good for consumers and for society, because not everybody can have the same kind of knowledge and due diligence, understanding everything. So in that, it's a transformation of role, isn't it? That you are becoming not just the transfer of goods, organizing logistics. You need to become much more of a human face as well, as a community player, let's say. Like almost the traditional role of the neighborhood shops, where people come in, they have a conversation, and they understand where the food comes from, and it's a kind of the more part of the community. So that also constructing this kind of trusted chain, whether it's a beef chain or fresh chain of other products.
Yeah, I think that's exactly where you find the split between selling a product without information and selling a product with information. And selling a product without information, then price is the first and sometimes the only criteria to decide on top of the look of the product, the look and feel. But what this is more and more on is on making choices. I mean, and choices are not always in money. If you offer choice to your customer, and that's what we want to do, then you can also offer different prices. You can offer different products for different groups of customers. But at the end, you want to go more and more into choices, and that's upping the baseline. So that baseline shows what you stand for as a supermarket. And you cannot sell, or you cannot translate into money many of the social issues. You cannot sell a product with and without forced labor. No, your baseline is there should be no forced labor. So you cannot bring that back into the price. Maybe it will have an effect on the price, but that's not what you want what you want to communicate, and even not what you want to explain to your customer. It should be a given, and that's in your brand name. What you also want to show, and that's where price becomes important, together with all the other information, and again, then you need the information, is where you offer choice. Because that's where you create awareness and where you create leverage. And so that's the balance there is. So it cannot always be in price. It needs also to be in fundamental choices that you make.
Yes, also in your presentation, you mentioned already a number of challenges, and then the focal area you're working on, and number one is data. How do you get the data across the chain? Because Albert Heijn, or under your Ahold Delhaize, you have 100,000 of products. And as the product safety, head of product safety, you have a team of 4, I understand. So you have to basically, can I imagine, understand all the 100,000 products based on your Excel sheet. So that's, you need data too, but how are these data collected and shared, provided by whom? And this is topic we've been discussing with multiple different stakeholders at different parts of the chain. And the answer is nobody. And Global Gap is not exchanging information with GS1, for example, or this. Fair Trade is not exchanging data with organic, for example. And also the packaging, the slaughterhouse, if their information, can they get information to from the piglets all the way to the supermarket chain? So who should take a lead? Should Albert Heijn, you in the end, to say like, I don't care, you organize the chain. I just need this set of information. I need this kind of question answered. Because just in our today's chat, you can see a number of startup new companies offering all kind of data solutions, blockchain, data platforms, exchanges. So technology is there. But if nobody is enforcing that standard, that the market and a different player will continue just being fragmented, because nobody really has interest to integrate. It is difficult. So should you, at some point, taking the where you have the biggest brand leverage, let's take fresh, that you say, I want it on that bag of beans, because you show the slide with beans, and then the kind of information you say should be there, it's not there today, right? I pick a bag of Kenyan beans, I don't see how much waste is recycled and then where does it come from? Is it coming by boat or airplane, or how much CO2 is emitted along the way? Should you request that? Should you request every fresh coming into Delhaize would need to have this information displayed, verified? I don't care how you do it, but you just have to do it. Is that the role you see it playing?
Well, I don't think our customers are going to be very happy with us if we display all that information, to be very honest. There is a lot of business-to-business information. And at the end, we need to have the pictures of food waste in the supply chain, of packaging and of carbon, just to name some topics. But a lot of that information stays business to business. And of course, we report on that on an aggregated level at the website or in annual reports. What's on pack needs to be information what the customer uses for daily decisions, what they really value also. And that information can be in logos. Well, then our idea is that there should not be too many logos. And if you have one, it should be more a holistic coverage of a message than very specific, because then you end up with numbers logos. So we need to filter out that information, but realize that information goes a lot also just up until us or up until our suppliers to make sure that what's upstream is arranged in the right way. And typically the way you make choices, so it's black and white, that information will not go to the customer because that's simply a baseline requirement.
We have a lot of questions, so I'd like to just start inviting people to ask a question. I'll start with Simona. You have a number of questions also about what is you're not doing as Delhaize. Simona, maybe you want to open your microphone and explain your question?
Hello, Leon. What a pleasure to meet you here. You said in one of the slides that it is also important to tell what not to do. Now, it is unclear for me what you mean here. Do you mean that it is that the customer needs to know what not to do, or that Ahold Delhaize needs to know what not to do? If it is the latter, you of course have a department of communication, and they will not be overjoyed when you want to tell the world what you're not doing. So how do you see this?
Well, Simone, good to see you here too, of course, long time ago. No, very good question, and it is a very fundamental question, because if you think about due diligence, and that was one of the topics of today too, then you think about setting priorities, making choices, and act on those. And there are simply topics, and well, I'll name one, and every topic I mention here can be controversial, because that's why they are on the list. Smallholder management, smallholder farmers in somewhere behind the processing industry. It is a very relevant problem. But for us, it's completely not actionable. We are not in charge there. We better spend our resources on other topics than on that topic. We can cooperate or collaborate on platforms with manufacturers, with all those people that are having an influence there. But that's a topic that we can explain to stakeholders, not only customers, but also investors, also NGOs. We can have the conversation, why are we not doing it? And we get usually more questions on the things we do not do than on the things we do. And that's why a decent analysis, a credible analysis, filtering out what's actionable, what's not actionable, what's relevant and not relevant, is getting more important. But also for ourselves, it is very helpful to really direct us to the topics where we can have an impact, a positive impact. So I hope that answers your question, Simone. And of course, the communication department they are there, and the easier answers is on the things we do and where we perform well, but that's not reality, and that's what we need to realize.
Thanks, Simone and Leon. Dick, you have a number of questions. Would you like to? You have to switch on your microphone.
I have a great number of questions indeed. Well, one was Milieu-Defensie requested from Ahold Delhaize that you do scope 3 CO2 emissions reduction on your whole portfolio of products. Well, I guess it's about 50,000 or something if we talk about Ahold Delhaize. So are the data available fit to do that? It's a first test. Can you do scope 3 as they ask with the data available? And obviously CO2 emissions reduction is a very important due diligence topic in Europe. The European Commission will request you to do the same thing. But is it feasible? I guess not, but I'm curious to learn your answer.
Well, asking the question is giving the answer, I think, Dick. So the easy answer is no, it's not. The real answer is we are better and better able to define the baseline and to move forward and to calculate reductions. And that's what we do with all companies together. I mean, there is so much unclear still in that area, but what we can do, well, we should do, but realizing that the baseline that we calculate now, also about years ago, we need to recalculate whenever new, better ways of calculation will come up. And that's the practice. You cannot wait working on it until everything is clear, because that's just not what what you should do, and that's also, I think, not reasonable. But you cannot say, well, supplier, just send me your footprint. That's simply not the reality. That's not how it works. So if you talk climate is a important one, but it's one that's so much in development that we'll see that in time.
And Leon, obviously I realize this, and the question behind my question is how to organize to do it, because there is big government, there is so much money that is being pumped in society, that big government is there and will ask the same questions as NGOs are asking. So I think there is a job to state what is possible, what is feasible, and what is not feasible, and to organize in a certain way. But how to organize to make it happen? Because the question is out, and the question will stay out. How to organize to make it reasonable, to make it a reasonable question?
Well, I think that's going back to my other answer, to be very honest. There is many initiatives where many parties are involved, and also science is not complete on that topic. I mean, a lot needs to be developed. One specific topic is sequestration of carbon in soil. When you think about agricultural production, it's completely unclear still how to do it and how to mainstream it. Can you wait doing it then until that's all clear? No. But you need to work with the available information, realizing that it will come from many different directions to us, many different sources. But again, also realizing that we are such a small part in the supply chain. So we rely on others, and others probably rely on us. That's the situation that we're in.
What would you advise the European Commission to indeed get it going, and do it in a reasonable way, and do it in a way that creates a success, that creates real CO2 reductions instead of just paperwork?
Well, I cannot give you the answer to that specific question, but what I would recommend is first realize what's all happening already on the ground. because there is still a big gap between what's happening on the ground and this story, the perception of the policymakers. So I would invite them and encourage them really to look into the supply chains and be aware of what's really happening on the ground, and then draw conclusions from that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dick. And you mentioned another challenge, which we didn't put in the poll question, science. Indeed, very important topic on especially environmental or the global issues. But Anushka, let's see what the response is to the biggest challenge. Okay, so still the majority is on about too many labels and standards, and it should be replaced with just one. For example, just the EU sustainability label. Technology and understanding is not perceived as a big issue, and the coordination also. Do you agree with this, Leon?
Well, I think it would be fun to combine the first and the fourth answer there, because if you have less labels, I would boil it down into a very limited number and you say one, then I'm very curious if there would be any customer still understanding what's behind that label. And that's the challenge that we have. I mean, I'm pretty sure that we need to have a limited number of messages on pack or with the product, but those messages should be clear. It should be clear what the message stands for. Otherwise, it's just covering something that nobody can act upon.
Should it, indeed, the question of Dick, should it be EU to make that choice already, to say we just, the rest all important, like the 6 criteria we asked the second question, but really, let's focus just on biodiversity. And that's the thing, really, that's compulsory, you have to work on it. And the rest is bonus. That could be something. So not fair trade, not talk about organic, and focus on CO2 as the number. Would that solve a little bit of the problem?
Well, of course, it would solve for CO2, it would create transparency. But then we should make sure that the customer or the stakeholder also understand how to compare products. Because sometimes it is not so relevant to compare side by side products from different origin, from different composition, and so on. So does the customer at the end understand then what's told on pack? And from that point of view, I think we need to simplify on pack, but at the background need to be able to explain what the details on the background are. But that's far too specific to put it all on the pack.
I have also a question more on the technical side, number of issue relating data. Andreas Schneider, if you are still there. You had a question about the data exchange.
Yeah, I was good morning or good afternoon. I was a bit too fast because when I was sending it off, you were explaining the data problem. I'm a bit surprised how quiet the retailers are taking the lack of standards in this field. I'm not saying that like that. I was participating in the Consumer Goods Forum in a meeting last evening. I'm part of the steering committee of the end-to-end value chains. I'm trying to bring a language to the full textile supply chain, so I'm having a specific look on that. And when I see identify, capture, share by GS1, and if I hear you in this good speech today, then I see a huge discrepancy between what the market needs, and this is your core standardization body with data model and with GDSN and all these things. You seem relatively relaxed on that field. I don't mean that impolite. How do you see this with the standards? Because this was obviously, I was surprised that so many people here were nodding at the standard topic. And I'm the guerrilla fighter against GS1 on that field, because for 10 years, I'm saying that they have to get an end-to-end organization and not a finished product organization. And I would say that if Miguel Opera was around, was in the meeting, so he knows about these things. How do you see that? Because I mean, you're really challenged. You do a lot, I can tell. I mean, it's really was a fun meeting here. How do you see this lack of standards, particularly in your food sector? Because in textile we have much more at the moment, and the food sector is hanging behind. If I see this without any judgment, just it's a pity because there's a lot to do.
Yeah, good question, Andreas. And I think we need to be clear here. We are talking here about data standards and not about certification standards. So it's and if you talk about standardization of data, then we are, well, in full support of that. But realizing that there is an existing landscape of standards, which is so diverse that it's difficult to bring any direction in there. And GS1, of course, you mentioned it, has done a great job also for us up until now. But of course, the data needs are expanding. Data details are increasing, and also the completeness of the assortment in those systems is difficult. But to be very honest, that's the data systems outside the company. If I look inside the company, there is a job to do also. So how can we connect in the right way? Not really standardized, but how can we connect to all those data sources there are? And it's very costly, it's very diverse, and also quite complicated. So it is not an easy one, but I'm pretty sure that developments are going into the right direction, because more and more there is awareness that the solution needs to be there. And manufacturers and retailers can play a good role there.
Yeah, because they get different requests from different retailers. So 10 retailers, 11 requests. This is what the bottom line last night was when we had this meeting. So I cross fingers for all of us, because I'm also a consumer. And so anyway, good luck. But it was very interesting today. Nice meeting you.
Yeah, thanks for the encouraging last words.
Thanks, Andreas, for joining.
I'm an optimistic guy.
Thanks, Andreas, for joining. It's really great to also learn from other sectors to compare. Actually, we have also a number of participants working on that solution. I have Patricia Leek. Patricia, would you like to explain what you're doing and how do you product, a solution, blockchain, can potentially answer to the question just also raised by Leon and Andreas?
Okay. I'm expecting to be called, but yeah, so thank you for this. Yeah, I am Patricia and I work at the New Fork, and we build a one-layer blockchain solution to basically get the supply chains transparent from farm to fork. We also had a project with Ahold Delhaize. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if Leon knows this, but it was with Hugo from Ahold Delhaize, and it was for the salmon in Japan, I think. But it was before I started at the New Fork. And we now successfully launched our first basically supply chain, and it's for juices. And we have more than 50 companies onboarded. And via the blockchain, you basically can verify the whole process, and that it also keeps it transparent and fair. And we basically want an integer agri-food industry. So that's what our solutions offer. And the next supply chain is going to be fish that we are working on at the moment. And of course, the juices, there need to be more companies onboarded, but it's ongoing now. And then we're going to start with fish. Does that make any sense?
Can you maybe explain also regarding on how your solution can be, it's also pitching in some ways to Leon, to Albert. What would you like to Leon to do about this?
Yeah, I think we said it before. At the moment, also I think the Netherlands is top 3 of Europe of food fraud, for example. what is not a nice figure to, because we are also based in Amsterdam, by the way. That's why I'm calling out the Netherlands. It's not nice to be the number 3 of Europe of food fraud. And then especially the Netherlands, the whole world looks at the Netherlands if you look at agri-food, because we are innovative in that sense. But then also, if you look at that we are number 3 of food fraud, that's not really a good number, right? And the change that needs to be made, it's huge, because it's not only food fraud, it's farm income, it's consumer trust. So if you want to work on that, the whole supply chain needs to be changed and needs to be transparent. And if it's transparent, then nobody can lie about it, right? Because then we can track everything. So that's basically where our solution come in. So that's what we do. We make sure that it becomes fair, because the whole supply chain will be tracked by blockchain technology that makes it transparent.
What are your challenges? What are your biggest challenge?
For us? Yeah, I think the biggest thing is we're still in the startup phase, but the food industry is major, right? So, for example, in Ahold Delhaize, what is like a $1 billion company, they also have to trust us to make sure that we provide a service for them that really will help them out. So to onboard really big global parties and to get in that network, that is for us a big challenge. So network would really help. Of course, we always have the financial thing because we are a startup, so we're always looking for funding and stuff like that. But yeah, at the moment, for fish, for example, we're now, my colleague had a call with somebody who has a good network in the fish, so that we could at least start talking to all the companies. But just to get to know all the big suppliers and the producers, that's a challenge, because it's global. You cannot only start in the Netherlands, because that's just not how the food works. Because if you touch one point, it just goes global, right? So that makes it more difficult.
So Leon, the problem is Patricia's companies will be one of many the young startup companies try to offer solution on transparency. But there's enough talent and solutions around. But still, you just mentioned it's also easy to get those information integrated, but you are in a position to integrate at least 8 countries in the world and 100,000 products. So how do we start? How do we move this even further, integrate all this great technologies and platforms and all the standards already, all the knowledge? What's the next step?
Well, I think Patricia said it already. We are involved in that kind of project, but there are so many supply chains that we make use of and that have their own initiatives already. And don't forget, this is all about chain of custody, trustfulness, and credibility in a total picture, where certification plays a role, where the length of the supply chain plays a role, but also relation with the supplier plays a role. So we are very careful to see where do we need which investment for which application, because you need to start somewhere, but what you do needs to be successful and needs also to be, at the end, also to pay off in a certain way. Doesn't need to be always in money. It can be in credibility. It can be preventing fraud, Patricia. But there is not so much one size fits all there. But we as a company, we look at those initiatives, and we are having pilots with blockchain technology, other technology. We are involved in the chain of custody, ISO committees, and that kind of things to make sure that completes the picture that we already have. And all those missing pieces in the puzzle we need to complete. Not a whole new puzzle. We need to close the gaps.
We have also Aya Kamoteva. Also have she's coming from Belgium. Aya, would you like to tell us what you do?
Hi, thank you. I'm Aya. I work for ILVO, the Research Institute of Agriculture, Fishery and Food in Belgium. And we built a data sharing platform that puts the farmer in the center of all the data activities in the food sector, in the whole food sector. in our platform, the consent of the farmer is the most important thing because of the code of conduct. And we want to make the farmers' life easier by collecting all their data activity in one platform, in one overview, because they have a lot of different applications and more are to come. And that's why we want to help the farmers in the first place.
Do you have a specific message to anyone on this panel or to Leon?
Not a specific one, but just wanted to give our Just Connect story.
Yeah, but I think this is, although not a question, this is also a very good example. I mean, we are working, my Belgian colleagues are working with you, but if you can create a data platform where, in this case, farmers have a benefit themselves from sharing information, from being able to benchmark themselves to a wider group of farmers, and in that way organize the data, I think that's the missed opportunities that we still have. That we just have a single data stream where also the exchange of data at the same level in supply chain can be much more valued to a certain extent. So I think that it's an excellent example for that.
Yeah,
great.
Thanks,
Daria. We're almost at the end of our session. We can still have another question discussion. I had earlier Peter have the number of questions. Yes, on the pricing issue. Peter, if you're still here, you can raise your questions. Peter Hoenderken, or have you left? Okay. So anyone else with the last question? We can take, yes, Simona, please.
Leon, you were talking about labeling and about understanding of the consumers. Now, I know that Lidl has tried the Eco Score in a test, which is an on-pack label like Nutri-Score, but for environmental aspects. How does Ahold Delhaize looks upon Eco Score? Because that is very easy for consumers to see the impact, at least the easiest way at the moment to see the impact of a product. It is a test of Lidl, of course, but you must have looked into it. So well, I'm curious.
Well, Simone, yes, we are looking into that. Not me myself, but some colleagues are doing that. And as you know, there are there are more than one initiative on eco scores. And two things are important there. At first, is it understandable what it stands for? And the second thing is, will it help us customers to make a sustainable choice? And that's not always the choice between, do I buy a bean or beef, but also what's the most sustainable bean variant, because I want to eat beans tonight. What's the best one? But also I want to eat pork or chicken or beef. What's the more sustainable type there? And that's a challenge for environmental labels currently, because their possibility to discriminate, to make differences within one category are quite limited. And that's what we see the customers need to make their decisions. So yes, we are looking at it. None of them are perfect, but well, they are in full development now. Also influenced, of course, by developments in Europe.
Andreas just left, or did you, Andreas, are you still there? Oh, you just raised your hand, but I need to go be a moderator in my own meeting. Okay, sorry, here's the last question. Anyone else has a question? If not, then I would say we had a great discussion, especially happy to have different players, also companies, startups providing solutions, especially thanks, Leon, for this very open discussion. And very exciting to see the direction we're going with the more and more vertical and horizontal collaboration in the sector. So have a good day, everybody. Enjoy the nice weather wherever you are. And till next time.